Thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel as we strive to get a more progressive voice of faith out to a larger audience. Our videos are mostly from the pastor at Community Christian Church in Springfield, Missouri, Dr. Roger Ray. We are always pleased to have feedback from our viewers. You can visit our website at spfccc.org or write to us at reverend.drray@aol.com.
The gospel lesson is from the 23rd chapter of Matthew. And it's not one of those texts where Jesus is being particularly nice. And I think that's one of the unfortunate things, is that we're constantly led to believe that Jesus was just the nicest guy in the world, that he would make a lovely neighbor, and you would hope that he would be a member of your family and spend Thanksgiving with you. And that just isn't the Jesus we meet in the text. In this particular text, Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it, but don't do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on your shoulders, but they are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. They do all their deeds to be seen by others. They make their phylacteries broad and the fringes of their prayer shawls long. They love to be seated in the place of honor at banquets and in the synagogues, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have people call them Rabboni. But you are not to be called Rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all students. And call no one your father on earth, for you have a Father, the one in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted." Sometimes it seems to me that a good fiction is a better way to tell the truth than to try to be a historian. The British comic book author Alan Moore in the 1980s created an imaginary hero who fought against a fascist government while disguised as Guy Fawkes in mask and hat. And for those of you that might not really be up on British history, Guy Fawkes was a guy who tried to blow up the Parliament building about 400 years ago in order to retaliate for a series of laws that the Parliament had passed, making it illegal to be a Catholic. One of the last of which was just repealed this week, as a matter of fact. Now a British royal can actually marry a Catholic. They can't be a Catholic, but they can marry a Catholic. Fawkes was unsuccessful, but his effort was immortalized by both a holiday and a poem that sort of threatens the government not to go too far in taking away the freedoms of people. Let me let you hear the poem in the voice of a movie character.
Remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder, treason, and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Now, Moore, the comic book author, was angry at Margaret Thatcher because he felt like she was pushing Britain towards becoming a police state. 20 years later, the Wachowski brothers used this same character to express their disdain for the way the Bush administration was using the fear generated by the 9/11 attacks to turn America into a police state. They produced the movie V for Vendetta, set in a fictionalized future Great Britain. But you can't watch the movie and not realize that he's talking about 21st century America. The premise of the film is that Britain was attacked with a biological weapon which killed thousands of people. But as the plot unfolds, we learn that it wasn't actually terrorists. It was actually the British government that did it to the population in order to frighten them into submission. They took away individual rights under the guise of patriotism, like the Patriot Act, and took charge of the media, which they used to keep people in a constant state of fear. The masked hero of the film devises ways of humiliating the government and persuading the public to come out of hiding and unite against the government's abuse of power. And at one point, V is able to control the government's emergency broadcasting system to deliver a very stirring revolutionary speech asking the people to set aside their fear and to unite against the tyrannical system. The speech is good enough that I want to take a couple of minutes for you to hear it.
Good evening, London. Allow me first to apologize for this.
The emergency channel!
I do, like many of you, appreciate the comforts of the everyday routine, the security of the familiar, the tranquility of repetition.
Bloody hell.
I enjoy them as much as any bloke. But in the spirit of commemoration, whereby those important events of the past, usually associated with someone's death or the end of some awful bloody struggle, are celebrated with a nice holiday, I thought we could mark this November the 5th, a day that is sadly no longer remembered, by taking some time out of our daily lives to sit down and have a little chat. There are, of course, those who do not want us to speak.
Just let me think.
I suspect even now, orders are being shouted into telephones, and men with guns will soon be on their way.
It's Chancellor Sutler.
Damn it!
Why? Because while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the means to meaning, and for those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there?
You designed it, sir. You wanted it foolproof. You told me every television in London.
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission.
We need cameras.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you, and in your panic you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutler. He promised you order, he promised you peace, and all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent.
So it came as no surprise to me to see the film's Guy Fawkes masks on protesters at Occupy Wall Street gatherings. It seemed to me such an appropriate piece of political theater that I bought a costume myself and have worn it to some of the Occupy Wall Street events held in Springfield. The media, however, has behaved towards the Occupy movement as if the media somehow were being coordinated to discredit the movement and to keep acting like they just don't understand why it's going on. Yesterday on CNN's morning news show, they actually brought in a high school dropout from the Atlanta Occupy movement to answer questions about the protest. Now, the more underground media, things like Democracy Now!, they run interviews with professors from Yale and Harvard and people like Kanye West and Michael Moore. But CNN, with their massive journalist prowess and their huge budget, managed to drag in a high school dropout who happened to be in front of their office building in Atlanta. But as silly as that was, you have to tune the dial to the far right to get a message that is even more crazy than the characters in the movie. I'm talking about none other than my good friend, Glenn By Goldnow Beck, who said earlier this week, I've got the clip actually.
Capitalists, if you think that you can play footsies with these people, you're wrong. They will come for you and drag you into the streets and kill you. They will do it. They're not messing around. Those in the media, and I say this, I am included in this, they will drag us out into the streets and kill us. If you're wealthy, they will kill you for what you have.
Too crazy for Fox. I mean, how nuts do you have to be fired from Fox? But this is how the media does fear-mongering to keep us scared and to keep us worried about people like the Wall Street occupiers. Now, I really despise the conspiracy theorists that always seem to abound at these protests. I go to several and oftentimes run into people that are just clearly off their meds. The truth is horrifying. We don't need to make stuff up to make life seem more frightening. In fact, I think that some of the media division of society was never actually planned. I think it just happened that way. I think news talk shows, they even did it to me at the newspaper, that they titled my column for several years From the Left, and they recruited someone else to write From the Right. They just couldn't find someone that could consistently write every week. So they just took away all the names. But you watch television news shows, they'll have a conservative and a liberal, always trying to give the appearance of balance. But what they have done in that is to create this huge split of partisanship in the country, in which the country is divided into two nearly equal parts. There's about 47% of America that's Republican and about 47% that's a Democrat, and we are led to believe that somehow it's the other side's fault. And so we fight back and forth as if the problems of poverty, lack of health care, the paucity of jobs with a living wage, the whole foreclosure crisis, throwing thousands of families out onto the street, was caused by either Republicans or Democrats, or conversely, it could be fixed by Republicans or Democrats, when in fact, they are both equally powerless and both equally to blame. One of the morning news shows, MSNBC's Morning Joe, has regularly featured Joe Scarborough saying that he just doesn't understand why the protesters are occupying Wall Street. They ought to be on Pennsylvania Avenue. They ought to be protesting in Washington, D.C. But one day this week, he actually chastised his partner, Mika, and other guests at the table, saying, "Don't you understand? The Republican Party is owned by Wall Street, and the Democratic Party is owned by Wall Street. Our current president receives just as much in political donations from Wall Street as Republican candidates do." So, Joe Scarborough, you answered your own question. Washington is not where the power is. Republican and Democrat is not where the power is. The power is where the money is. I don't think it was originally intentional, but I do believe that the media keeps trying to pour us into this battle between Republicans and Democrats, as if both Republicans and Democrats were not equally to blame and voters on both sides were not equally being victimized. The only thing that scares the people in power is if the people who are not in power stop fighting each other and start to unite. It's one of the themes of the movie, that if everyone would put on the Guy Fawkes mask, if everyone would become a part of fighting against the totalitarian control of the powerful, then things would have to actually change. As soon as the economy started to tank, the first target we heard about was teachers' unions and public employees' collective bargaining and labor unions. Men and women, come on, we're smart people. Was it the middle class wages paid to union members that shipwrecked the American economy? Was it? Wasn't it the middle class workers who actually built the wealth of this nation that was traded away in casino-like financial instruments that have made a handful of investment bankers very rich and has robbed the pensions of the middle class? More than 2,000 Occupy Wall Street demonstrators have been arrested. Many others have been pepper sprayed, handcuffed, beaten with nightsticks, and at least one two-term Iraq veteran has sustained a nearly fatal head wound from a police-fired tear gas canister. But there has yet to be a single arrest of a Wall Street banker who caused the collapse of the global economy. Not a single indictment has been brought. No one has been jailed who actually caused the crisis. And the mainstream church is doing exactly what it always does. Nothing at all. If they speak, they call for peace. They call for people to calm down, as if it was a virtue to be a silent victim. I want to say this very clearly. Peace, in the absence of justice, is surrender. The people who ask you to realize that there's always two sides to the story and you shouldn't get very upset and we should all just be peaceful are asking you to shut up and be a quiet victim. What they're asking you to do is surrender. And to that request, there's really just one answer. No. The people who have affordable health insurance have been trained to resist changes that would bring the uninsured into having access to health care, without ever questioning why we have to siphon off billions of dollars to pay insurance company executives who do not treat patients, who do not perform surgery, and they don't even empty bedpans. They just take money out of the system. We have the largest percentage of our population without access to health care of any industrialized nation in the world, while we boast that we have the most advanced medical sciences in the world. The problem is not the sick people. The problem is the sick system. We've been taught to scrap with each other over the crumbs under the table without ever looking up to the palace where our resources are really going. If you look at what the Old Testament prophets really did, what they really said, most religious people today in mainstream churches would swear they were not even being religious. They were talking about politics too much. You look at this Micah text that Ashley read for us. He is saying specifically, you always say peace when you've got enough wealth. But when someone's got something you want, you make the poor people go out and take it for you. And as a result of that, the prophet is saying that God hates those people. That God will not tolerate that kind of abuse of the poor to go to war for profit. And in the same vein, Jesus confronts the hypocrisy of religious leadership that worries about personal piety while ignoring the fact that there are people who are genuinely suffering, people who are homeless, people who are sick. People are camping out on the streets of our cities now because our government works for the banks and our churches work for the banks. We have traded honesty for lies, uncomfortable truth for comfortable indifference. We have abandoned the message of the prophets and the apostles to be seduced by the rhetoric of the media and of political parties. Now, I want to tell you a short story before I relinquish the microphone today. Last year, the lead guitarist for Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello, became aware that all the guitars that all of he and other rock stars who were making themselves very, very rich, all those guitars were being manufactured in pretty bad conditions in South Korea. And those South Korean guitar makers went on strike for better conditions. And then Gibson and Fender and all of the great famous guitar makers did what corporations oftentimes do in the face of a strike. They closed the factories and moved them to mainland China. So a handful of those Korean workers pooled their resources and sent representatives to the annual Association of Music and Merchants trade show in Anaheim, California. They wanted to plead their case directly to the musicians who use their instruments. Morello and others were persuaded to help the striking workers, and so they organized. They organized a concert to raise money to support the striking workers in Korea. But just before the concert, that huge earthquake struck in Haiti. And those Korean unemployed strikers said that the people in Haiti needed the money more than they did, and they had them send all of the proceeds from that concert to Haitian relief. Morello was inspired by that kind of sacrifice because these guys had families back in Korea that were doing without, but they sent those resources to Haiti. And so Morello wrote a song, Worldwide Rebel Song, to encourage that kind of unity among the victims of the world, because that kind of unity will be necessary for all of us to rise up out of our apathy, our individualism, and by uniting with one another, we can restore dignity and freedom to everyone. If I could do one thing for the church of today, it would be to tell you to stop being afraid. Just stop being afraid. I'm not gonna surrender, and I hope you won't either.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverenddray@aol.com for more information.